Welcome to Elevate Your Event, your favorite podcast for transforming fundraising events. Join us weekly for expert tips and creative ideas to make your next event a standout success.
In this episode of Elevate Your Event, we are joined with our friend and event planner, Adrienne Coffey, with A Touch of Bliss Events, as we discuss event planning, why it's important to hire an event planner, and other tips and tricks to help you out with your future events.
Welcome back to the Elevate Your Event podcast, where we talk about all the various ways you can make your next fundraising event better than the last one. And with that, we have a special guest today, Adrienne Coffey, who is absolutely an expert in helping you make your next fundraising event better than the last one.
No pressure.
Yeah, thanks for that intro. I'm not sure I would call myself an expert, but we'll get there.
You are. How many? You've done countless numbers of events, right? I mean, you've done a lot.
Yeah, like over 1,000.
Yes.
That makes you an expert.
Thank you. I thought it was 10,000 was the expert level, though.
That's if you're trying to learn how to play the piano. And apparently hit a golf ball far. But other than that, I think 1,000 events puts you in that expert range. Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm joined here with Elise Druckenmiller. She's the head of sales here at Handbid. And we've got a long history with Adrienne. We're really happy to get her on the podcast. She's so busy, especially this time of year.
Especially this week.
This week.
I know. This week. It's my fundraiser this week. And guess who's the event planner for it?
You
can't see us pointing if you're on the podcast, but we're all pointing at Adrienne. So, no, and we will talk about that a little bit later, because that was a big change for us. And we had a separate set of podcasts about our own fundraiser, just trying to share, being a little authentic here at Handbid about like what it takes to put on an event, especially your own. But at the same time, we had also mentioned that we had hired an event planner for the first time. So,
and now we're here.
And yes.
And she hasn't fired us yet. Yeah. She might have fired you, but she hasn't fired us. Awesome. Okay. Well, let's break this down, okay, into kind of various pieces here. So tell us a little bit, like, first of all, how did you get into event planning? Where did you start? Talk about, fundraising events in general. And then when you start talking to charities, like, what's the point where you're like, hey, you're ready for me, or you're not ready for me yet?
Yeah, good question. So I started in fundraising events in college. I went to school for business and then decided that I wanted to try to do something. And so fundraising events was really the easy way in. I did a couple different internships, really just loved it. And then out of college, worked in nonprofit organizations, planning their fundraising events, but also in a nonprofit, as everyone knows, 1,000 other things as well.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the events really got like pushed down to the bottom of my list. And that was really what I wanted to do. And so one year my husband gifted me my company name, and he said, you should just start something. And at the time, that was the only thing I knew how to do. So
that's awesome.
Started my company planning
That's so
fundraising
sweet.
events. I know.
Oh.
I actually think right after you did that, we met at a Starbucks.
Yes. It was very soon after that. Because what year did you start?
We ran our first auction in May of 2011, and then we really didn't get fully started until about 2015.
Okay, I started in 2014, so it was right at the same time.
Yep.
There. So, but yeah, I just love the event side of fundraising for nonprofits, not necessarily all the other things that go along with fundraising.
Right.
And then mostly like the strategy behind the events. Like, why are we doing this? What's the purpose? What are we trying to get out of it? Not just like, we should have a gala because everyone has a gala.
Right.
That's how they make all their money.
I know, that's how we got started.
Not a thing.
We need to make money. How do we do that? I think we need to throw a party.
So that's kind of how I got started.
Come a long way. Well, that's great. And so when are people ready to start talking to you? When they're ready to talk strategy and kind of starting to put together a rationale for having an event? Or
yeah. So the biggest thing is like, can you spend money on events without the guarantee that you're going to make money on them, right? Like, is your organization sustainable enough to do that?
Yeah.
And also, do you have enough of a donor base to be able to have a large event? I would say like anywhere between like 10 and 15% of your donor base comes to your events for various different reasons. So if you have 150 donors and you're trying to have an event for 150 people, like obviously not going to happen.
Right.
And you can't like guarantee that your donors are going to invite all their friends because they're just so passionate about it. Like that's just unrealistic. So I think once an organization gets to the point where they have like discretionary funds to be able to put on an event, because it costs money to put on the event before you get to the event.
Right.
It takes money to make money. We talk about that here at Handbid all the time.
All the time. Yeah. Once your organization gets to a point where you can like spend money on an event and you have enough of a donor base, like that's where you can really start thinking about an event strategy. And then when we start talking to organizations of like, what do you want to get out of it? Like, what are the goals of this event? Your goal cannot just be make a bunch of money. Like that doesn't happen. You can make a bunch of money on it, but it's not consistent.
Right.
Not going to happen the first year. It takes a while to build that up. So kind of thinking
You're absolutely
through
right. Well, and if you don't have the long-term perspective in place, you can easily give up like after year one saying, oh, these don't make any money.
Right.
Exactly. So thinking of like other strategies behind the events is what we try to get our nonprofits to work on too, of like, you're not going to think this event is successful if your only goal is a dollar figure that you just created on your own and have no basis for.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are the things do you encourage them to think about when they talk about like criteria for success?
Different like strategies of what do you want to get out of it? So the biggest thing is like, what do the donors do at the end of the event besides like, oh, that was fun, see you next year kind of a thing? What can we get them to commit to? Whether that be like money or resources or time or whatever goes with it. It's not just about this one night. Like we're not planning all of this just for one day kind of a thing. So how do we get them to kind of engage throughout the year? So thinking through that with your event strategy of like, you can have a really awesome program and everyone's going to be so happy and like excited and passionate in the moment. Yep. But then the next day, are they going to forget about what you said at the event the next night? So thinking about strategies behind that of like, can we get them to commit to monthly donations so that they see your organization every month, or
finding a way to keep them engaged annually throughout the year.
Yeah. Volunteering or whatever other levels of support you need, because not everyone in your room is going to be able to just give you cash.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if they're invited from someone else who bought a table or something like that.
Or maybe not even ready to give you cash. Maybe you need to kind of nurture them a little bit. Because I would say, when we talk to a lot of our clients, very similar, right? Like, yes, you have monetary goals. And we also try to help them understand, are those realistic monetary goals? Yeah. But at the same time, we also say, here's some other things that you should try to get out of here. How do I grow my, connected audience, right? Whether they're donors or not, that might happen further down the road. But how am I expanding the base of people that I am generally connecting to throughout the year? So that's one thing. Like you want to nurture that. And then the other piece of that is then how do I also use the event as a way of like advancing a relationship with somebody, right? I mean, that's the other challenge. It's like, that's why we get into these check-in wars with some of our clients around why it's important to actually collect their information at the door.
Well, we find that all the time too, of like you buy a table and then you have 9 or 8 guests and the organization is like, oh, they said they have all their 8 guests. We don't need their names. I'm like, well, what do you...
But why?
Why
not?
wouldn't you want their information?
Right.
Like, don't you want to follow up with them? You should know who they are. What if they donate and you can never connect it back to the person who invited them to that table?
Right.
Yeah,
There's so much sometimes, I think, an anxiety with some charities around bothering their sponsors for names. They don't want to do it, but they don't realize what the ramifications are of not doing it.
Right.
And there's there's plenty of them. Like one of them obviously is like, Druckenmiller guest is not somebody that I can nurture throughout the year, right? Yeah. But beyond that, it's like if Elise shows up as my guest or say she brings a friend and doesn't fill out her sponsorship and it's just Druckenmiller guest, and then that person wants to bid, what am I doing at check-in now? I'm entering in all their data.
Yeah.
Like I could have done that, or they could have done that
ahead of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And saved everybody a bunch of time. Like, well, we don't really want long lines. Well, if you don't want long lines,
get their information.
Get their information.
Yeah. You don't have to have long lines. They're not one and the same of like gathering information and long lines.
They think it is.
They think it is. We had one nonprofit like that, and one of the like lessons learned story of like they did not want to collect any information ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And then when we arrive, at check-in, we warn them many times, like, this is going to be like 3 minutes a person. You have 300 people coming. This is a very long check-in line. The venue setup that they were in was really cramped at check-in. And so naturally the line goes outside, and naturally it was raining that day. So it was just a complete mess. So then
were you at the same event I was at last week?
Yeah.
I could imagine this happens like way too many times.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then they decided, we skip getting everyone's information. We'll just pass out bid numbers. And I was like, well, how do you know whose number goes with who?
Who is that attached to?
They were something else. Interesting people. And so they decided, we don't care. We're just going to send everyone in and we'll pass out numbers during the paddle race. Well, of course, our auctioneer is really upset about this,
of course,
right?
Like,
as we are, and we're like, okay, you're just ruining all of your fundraising activities at the moment. Just like get people champagne down here while they're waiting in line. Bring them apps, like anything else. Like you have to get their information.
You want to diffuse stress and a line. We've talked about this before. Hand them a drink when they show up.
Yes.
And they will stand in that line for 20 minutes. I'm not saying you should have a 20-minute line. You shouldn't. But they will.
If you did, you wouldn't know.
Well, and we were at an event last week, right? We saw that. We couldn't even get them to come to check-in because they were chit-chatting and drinking their champagne.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, hello, over here.
Yeah.
If
you all could move along a little bit, we could make this not a gathering at the moment.
Right.
The gathering takes place in there.
Yeah, at the bar.
Right.
At the bar. So getting the information ahead of time is like key to the lines, check-in process, guest experience in general.
Yes.
That's the first thing they experience at your event. And if you like...
It sets the tone.
It does. If you don't have the wherewithal to ask somebody ahead of time what their information is, why are we standing on stage asking them for thousands of dollars?
Right.
Like you're bothering the sponsor already to buy a sponsorship. Just
so do you
get the
talk
names.
to your clients about, I already know the answer to this because I'm a client, but do you talk to your clients about goals at check-in? Like what do you want to accomplish at registration? So when that person passes registration and goes inside, what do you have and what do they have?
Exactly.
Yes. Right.
That's a huge thing for us too, because like just a couple months ago, we had one client who very, very smart, has done events for many years. She says, all we are doing at check-in is passing out a name tag. And I said, that's it. She has all their stuff in ahead of time. Like, just give them their name tag and send them on their way. Okay, I'm going to trust you on that one.
Right.
Well, we get to the event.
Anybody who says name tag at check-in, you should not trust.
It's like, there's a little bit, you've done this exact event for like 8 years. Like, I'm going to guess you probably have this process down, right? Yeah. I don't need to question it.
Right.
Well, we get to the event. 2 people come through. She's like, you have to say all this stuff. And I was like, okay, that's where we were asking. Like, what are we doing at check-in here? We're not just passing out a name tag. So we now have like, okay, we just really have to write it out, especially if someone comes up and is doing check-in like in shifts or something like that.
Ooh, bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to have to, have this little script for them to
We've
go
learned
off
too.
of.
I mean, look, you obviously have done a lot more of the event planning conversation side because we tend to show up as a mobile bidding company.
Right.
And we're working like as an event lead or something. We're typically working with you or we're working with the client who didn't hire you. And like we've seen those things, right? Like I remember one event, we show up and they moved check-in from the walkthrough to the bottom of an escalator. I'm like, this is not going to work, by the way, unless you turn the escalators off. I'm just going to picture what that looks like. And then, like, literally, like, 30 minutes into check-in, 6 volunteers get up and walk away.
Shift's over.
I was like, where are they going? Oh, their shift is over. I'm like, oh man.
No.
So they're like, note for next time.
Well,
are you planning to have volunteer shift change during check-in? Because that will be a no for us, right? Like you just learn, right? Through the years, kind of what you've experienced. Yeah.
Well, you got to go through a whole new training, and you have a line of people at the bottom of at the bottom of an escalator that can't get downstairs.
I'm talking to the hotel guy. Like, can you turn that off? He's like, ooh, I don't think the fire department will let us. I'm like, well, I think the fire department's going to want you to when he sees
what you've created.
500 people pile on top of each other.
There's a lot of stories of like, this is how it works. I've seen it so many times. And then you go to an event and you're like, I never could have guessed this is what we were going to plan on. Like,
Yes.
I've never seen anything like this. How have I not seen this so far?
I know. We did an event in Miami and I find out on Wednesday exactly because they had a little bit of a meltdown when Handbid told them, no, this is a bad idea. And because of like just the mass number of events we were doing and the fact that I knew this client, I go to this event, okay?
Well, and the fact that we learned that they wanted you there 5 days before the event.
Yes. So anyway, it's kind of like, okay, last minute, okay, who can go? Everybody's booked. All of our staff is booked around the country. Jeff, you can go. All right, great. So I go. And so I find out on Wednesday what they're doing. I'm like, yeah, our service team is right. This is a really bad idea. We have done it this way for 20 years. Okay, well, can we propose a better way to do it? No, it has to be done this way.
Yeah.
Well, I should have said no, but we're like, all right. I said, it's going to be a disaster. I'm just telling you. And it was a disaster. And, so a lot of times, let me ask you, do you put your foot down in certain cases where you're like, this is just not going to work?
It's so hard to find that line though, too, especially like you're saying, if they've been doing it the same way for many years and you're like, I know this isn't going to work, but I've never seen your specific event before.
Right.
But I can just tell. And so it's so hard to say like, this isn't going to work. It has to change 100% versus like,
but you speak
I'm warning
up and say, I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this.
Right. And like, here's the things we've experienced in this situation before and why we think this won't work and why it's going to be different than last year for you.
Right.
Because we have these different things that we're planning this year. And I would say like half the time people listen and then the other half the time they don't. And then they're mad that it didn't work.
At you.
At me.
We have a support
Do you
group
feel
on
that?
Thursdays.
Yeah.
It's all your fault.
Yes. Yes. It's every Thursday. It's at 4:00 at Los Dos Patrios. You're welcome anytime.
Okay, there we go. You actually wait till 4:00. That's impressive.
We have to wait for Abby to get home from school.
Yes.
Day program.
Yeah. But no, you're right. You're right about that. But, and again, so we go back to what are your check-in goals? What do you intend to have the people know or walk away with when they leave check-in to go into the event? And what do we get out of it? We get their name, we get their email, we get their phone number, we get their credit card, hopefully. They get whatever, information on how to donate, like what table they're at, right? And all that kind of stuff. So yes, we agree with that. Just to kind of create that good guest experience where they walk in, they're like, so where do I go? What do I do? Or they come back. I love my favorites when they come back to the check-in area because they don't know what table they're at.
12, remember?
Yes.
So, Adrian, tell me, how do you manage, prior to the whole guest experience and check-in conversations, but how do you manage board expectations as they start throwing out ideas and you're like,
that
okay.
never happens. Board members don't show up and give ideas to event planners.
No, especially not pyro.
Yeah.
They don't ever give that idea.
I think for us, we always have a conversation at the beginning with like everyone who wants to give their opinion of like, okay, now's the time. Give us your opinion now. And then we try to limit the amount of people on like the regular meetings to just the people who could actually make decisions, just because it becomes a lot of chit-chatting.
Yeah.
As you guys know.
And debate between.
Yes.
Of like things that are irrelevant at the time, you know? And a lot of like rabbit trail stuff. So that's really our like way to combat it is like, get your opinions in now. We will consider them all. But moving forward, this is like the max 4 people that get to be on the planning committee and making decisions here.
Well, and we've learned that too, even in our own organization, that you've got a planning committee, you have a board, and then we now as kind of, I guess I sit on both of those committees, right? Or the board and we do need to know basis now.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there's every once in a while, I'll throw something out to the board saying, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
Like I threw our event survey out and that is harmless. They can, give me feedback on what questions we ask, people, how'd you like the event or whatever. But other things, it's like, oh my God, one night I made the worst mistake of inviting the entire board to like check out like the step and repeat backgrounds and the money and all this other stuff we're building at the event because I just thought they would find it really cool. And then I had 8 opinions on what to change on it.
Or the food menu.
The menu is the worst. I was just going to say that. Don't ever tell your board the menu because everyone has different opinions.
Just have a gluten-free and a vegetarian option. I mean, you'll be fine.
There's like way more options now. So
I know, but
we cannot discuss menu. Someone move forward with it.
I know. I used to be one of those, though. It was so funny. I mean, we've told this story before in our podcast, but like, I'd go to the event and I'd be like, this menu is kind of just boring. Like, what is going on with this? And then I come to find out my wife and my sister-in-law were the ones picking it out every year. And
they don't like salt and they don't like goat cheese.
They have limited palates. Let me just put it out there. They have limited palates. So it's like, then I find out that you can actually go to the caterer and sit down and do a formal tasting. And I'm like, I'm inviting myself next year to this. So
that's a fun thing.
We turned it into an auction item.
So, yeah, usually we have our organizations do it like biggest sponsor gets a seat at the tasting table.
Exactly
or
right.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We auctioned it off for like $2,000 to Derby tasting because it was at Footer's Catering. And I guess I didn't realize how amazing it was. Like I show up and they're serving you drinks and then there's like a 5-course meal and you're trying all this amazing gourmet food. And we had the debates.
I just want to throw some more events to do that.
Just to do the tastings. You don't have to eat for the next 2 days because you had so much food.
But don't invite your entire board to your tasting for sure.
No.
Yeah, keep that one under wraps. There's certain things we keep under wraps, and it's not to hide things from your board. It's just because they're inconsequential to the revenue, and for the most part, largely inconsequential to the guest experience. It's just that you cannot deal with this many opinions.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you do that with your golf tournament, right? I noticed like what sponsor things are going in this, grab bag thing. Like we're just going to pick those. Like we're going to figure that out.
We do. We pick them.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. It's hard to top them year
Right.
over
But
year.
you can't have 15 people chime in.
No, you cannot.
No.
Right.
No.
Okay. So, but outside of that, like you have a cutoff. It sounds like you have a cutoff date. You're like, okay, so we're cutting off debate. And now we're in execution mode because we used to run into this problem too. Like, and we had to put the kibosh on it. So by the way, Saturday, you're welcome to do the same. Like if I have a board member that shows up and wants to move couches around, you can just tell them no. Right. I mean, we've run into that before and I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah. We have a few strategies for responding to that one that we will not reveal.
I've been to events where the board member doesn't like where her table is. She wants it moved and that other kind of fun stuff.
Or they brought 4 more people and you only have a table of 10.
Yeah.
And now you have to have a table of 14.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No problem.
Never seen that.
We could do that for you for sure.
Oh, gosh.
Someone hide my face behind the scenes here.
Oh my God. So let's move on to some like productive conversation here. So tips for give us some tips. Like when through your experience, you've seen a lot. Give our audience some tips on what you think will drive better success for them.
For events in general?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think the varied goals for the event are huge because then you can have so many different pieces to the event and elements of it. And then essentially it's like a success either way, right? You may not hit that revenue number, but your event is still a success. Like we touched on a little bit, like you can't just do it one year and hope that it knocks it out of the park. Like you have to build on it for so many years.
Right?
Yeah. You have to invest in it. And I think
it's a commitment.
It's a huge commitment because people have to remember that you have your event every year and not just, you can't just pick a cool theme and then everyone's like, oh, I got to go to that event. Right. Denver has thousands of events every month. Like there's so much competition here that you really do have to like build that up. So I think that's a big thing that a lot of nonprofits forget too, of like, oh, we tried that theme. It didn't work. Well, did you try it 1 year and then you stopped? Like that's why it didn't work because you didn't keep going.
Right.
Isn't that funny though? I mean, think of the paradox there, right? You've got, I've done it for 20 years and I refuse to change, or I did it once and I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
Is there something in between those that's more logical or rational?
Well, I think the other thing is too, like if you found something that works, keep the basis of that and then kind of adjust or add fun new elements as you go on instead of like completely changing it.
Well, I would say we learned that with your event last year, right? You guys had done Derby for how long?
15 years.
Okay. And then we pivoted and completely changed it and did a country concert. There was no Derby element. It was not around Derby Day. It was a full-on country concert with a national act out of Nashville. And it was good. It was great. I mean, we had a blast, but the feedback was bringing the Derby back.
Yeah.
And so we did, right? We're doing it now in 2 days, which I'm sure is on your calendar. But we've added an element of the country concert.
We have.
On a smaller scale.
And there's another lesson learned there, though, which was we took like an event scheduling conflict.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
As a, basically a catalyst to change something.
Correct.
And so when we got booted from our Derby date, and guess what? There's only one day a year you can have a Kentucky Derby party. So when you get booted on that day, you're not having a Kentucky Derby party.
Right.
So we decided we were going to have to do something. So we pivoted, but we also kind of, I think, justified it because we're like, there's a lot of board and committee fatigue on doing a Derby party. You do an event for 15 years, and you're kind of like, yeah, we would change pieces of it, but a Derby party is a Derby party. And so for us, it was like one of those things where it's like, yeah, we're kind of sick of the Derby. Let's just do a country concert instead. So we did Country for a Cure, and we did it in the fall. And we're like, this is it. We're moving on this. This is awesome. Okay.
We even went as far as like creating a logo and branding everything that could be reused with that same logo.
Yep. Yeah.
And guess what happened?
It's all in
all
storage.
in.
It's all in storage.
This is why we had to reprint all the signs, Adrian.
Yeah.
So anyway, but the point was that our donors were not fatigued
They weren't
from the
tired.
Derby.
Yeah.
And we never asked them.
We-
We assumed.
Right.
We just assumed, like, they came anyway to Country for a Cure,
Yeah.
right? But they were like, yeah, we want the Derby back. And I remember last year on Derby Day when we didn't have our event, and we decided to go to another Denver Derby party instead, which, by the way, is way not as good as ours. Okay? Just going to point that out. But anyway, I got texts all day from my donors, disappointed there's no Derby event today, was super excited about putting on my Sunday best and betting on the horse race and blah, blah. And it was like, oh man, I guess maybe we got to definitely bring this back.
Yeah.
So,
But what would you have done if you didn't have the date for the Derby?
Well, we
we
would have moved venues.
would have moved venues, and we have
didn't
a
want-
very good relationship with the folks at Fiddler's Green. And so we do everything we humanly can to keep that
Keep
date,
that.
and they have now helped us do that. So,
Yep. And they
we have
wanted a
that-
Derby party.
We have that date secured. There's not a risk. Well, there was not a risk this year, and I suppose hopefully in the future there will not be a risk of that event being booted out of that facility. And that's just because there was a concert that was there that same day. So you do
Which
not
they
want-
moved this year.
Well, you don't want to run a fundraiser when there's a massive rock concert
Right.
with 15,000 people right next door.
No.
Yeah. Can't hear the program at that point.
No, and they walk right through your event.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think we're good there. But yeah, I mean, and because like there are certain types of themes, right? And I think when you're strategizing with your clients, you have to give them the pros and cons. You want to have a golf tournament, you're subject to weather, okay? And so the time of year matters, and especially in Colorado. If you want to have a sort of themed event that's around a sporting event, Super Bowl, Derby, whatever, guess what? It has to happen on one day.
Yep.
And the other thing is it also forces the timeline too, because the horse race is at 5 p.m. in Denver, roughly. Okay.
Yeah.
So that has to be in the heart of your event. People can't show up at 4:30, bet on a horse race that starts 20 minutes later.
Right.
So they're coming in the afternoon, and then it's like, are they leaving at 6? Like 2 to 6? That's kind of a weird. Then what's everybody do? It's 6 o'clock. They're hungry.
Yeah.
So we've extended it to 8. We have now a country band. I mean, I don't know.
It's a whole day now. It's the Derby Day.
Derby Days.
Yeah.
They call it Derby Day.
So what else would you say? Tips for success.
Listen to your event planner.
Yeah.
Hire an event planner.
That's what
Hire
I
an
would
event
say.
planner. The other thing we kind of talked about a little bit of like, don't just copy other people. Just because they have a successful event doesn't mean that your group will have a successful event. I mean, even with the themes, your crowd is used to one thing, like you're saying, and a different crowd is used to a different type of event or a different way that event flows. Just because you have the same theme or style or layout as an event you went to as a guest doesn't mean that your crowd also agrees with that.
100%.
Right.
And like we can stick with our event as a theme because we've tried all those things, and you're absolutely right. There isn't, the big Derby event in Denver is downtown, and it is full of the younger generation. Let's put it that way. Okay. 20s and 30s. Okay. I'm old. Okay. And
We should be there, Adrian.
I know.
it's a party, but it's not, ours is definitely higher end. The food is higher end. The drinks are higher end. The experience, the bands, the entertainment,
Yeah,
the ability
it's
to bet in the
elevated.
race. It is massively elevated over that, and it costs a lot more money to go.
Yes, it does.
Okay, but that's what our audience wants. Our audience is in an age group where they're not in a fraternity anymore.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's not about getting completely hammered off of as many beers and red Solo cups that you can drink and that kind
Mint
of stuff.
juleps.
Yes. Well, we went to last year's Derby party.
We did
I got
not-
the last one.
You did.
And this is 2 hours before the race started. So
Oh gosh.
Yes.
we don't run out of alcohol at our event, by the way. So anyway, but the point is
Tips
that
for success.
Tips.
Don't run out of alcohol.
if we turned our event into that, and I'm not criticizing them, they have their audience, right? But if we turned
Yeah,
our
I mean, it was
event-
sold out.
If we copied
out all the
theirs,
time, yeah. Mm-hmm.
If we copied their event, it's $150 for a ticket. Sell as many tickets as you can, but there was no QR codes up there. I would tell you 90% of the people that show up there have no idea who the charity is.
They don't even
Exactly.
know that it's for a charity.
I agree with
Right.
that.
Yeah. So because of all those things, like that's not our audience. And so you're absolutely right. Like you can have a Derby event, but it doesn't have to be what every Derby event's like. You can make it your own, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So to that point, maybe you kind of alluded to this, but the why. Why are we here? Are we here for a party? I mean, sure, we want to show our donors a good time. Absolutely. But why are we here?
Yeah,
Right? You've
well-
got to talk about it. You have to bring and
I brought it up last week.
you've got to
when
connect with your donors.
Yeah.
I was helping the staff
Or
with
your
check-in
audience.
So we went to an event last week, and organization near and dear to my heart. I'm helping the staff with check-in. And so I asked this guy, like, full on out, is it Visa or MasterCard or Amex tonight, sir? And he's like, what do you need my credit card for? I go, well, you're at a fundraiser.
Right.
And he goes, oh, fair enough. Pulls his credit card out. Like sometimes you have to remind people why you're not just here for the food and the drink. You're here and you're going to get asked. I know this is always a joke when I tell people at check-in, they're like, what do I need this paddle for? I mean, it's very simple. When they ask who wants to donate $10,000, just hold that over your head. It's high so the auctioneer can see it. And he's like, ho, 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 ho. I go, well, now you know what it's for.
Right. Now this is why you're here.
Or they're like, I don't need that. I don't need that. I'm like, just take it just in case. I promise you'll come back to me later
Right.
and ask for one.
Right.
And
Yep.
you'll have to stand. Yeah. I think the other tips for success with the program, like so many people don't adjust their program to the type of event they're having. We had one organization who had like a traditional gala, really, really successful gala. They decided they wanted to pivot to a younger crowd, which doesn't have as much money. So
Yeah.
that was a bad idea in the first place, which we warned them against. The organization dissolved. I'm not sure if that had something to do with the gala or not, but they wanted to pivot to a younger, like band-focused, casual open house style event. But then when we started talking about programming, they had a 45-minute program
Oh,
for
you're
a
gonna lose them.
standing event. And then they're like, well, we'll just add tables and chairs for everyone. And I was like, so we're now back to a gala. This is no longer the purpose of what we wanted to pivot to. Your program could be 5 minutes, max 5 minutes. You're going to have to put signage up everywhere, put it on your coasters like you guys do, like somewhere else. Give them glasses to take home that has your information on it. Somewhere else we have to get all the information out, but it cannot be a stage program. And I think that's what a lot of people failed to do when they come up with their like event theme or style or layout.
Yeah, you have to know the environment. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. I mean, we don't do a traditional paddle race. Okay. And I know there's been, we've done them in the past. Okay. But now we are outside at an outdoor concert venue. It is really hard.
This has been a debate for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The pros and cons.
Yeah,
Well,
I agree with that.
But
It's
I mean,
hard.
like, yes, we have board members that constantly ask the question, but the answer is like, we've been to enough events. You've been to enough events where you know when those things are going to work and when they're not. And I love them. in the right environment.
Yes.
But an outdoor concert where people are walking around and, kind of doing their thing and they're in fire pit tables and couches and sofas that are on the lawns and stuff, it's not easy to keep their attention. And so last year, this is how you learn and evolve, right? So last year, check and fail, okay? Because the check-in strategy was they're going to walk in the door with a donation card with a QR code on it on how to donate, okay? Those were not handed out at check-in. Okay.
And those we didn't talk about them.
Those were left in a box, okay, and not given to people. And so
happens more often than you think.
Right. Yeah. So Adrienne was not doing check-in. Don't worry. Okay. That's why she's hired now. So anyway, but this year we're not doing that. Okay. We're going to put them on coasters that are going to be everywhere. We printed cardboard coasters, Derby Day style, with a QR code in the back on how to support us. They can take them home. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. That QR code is all over our venue. Okay. And so that's the difference. You learn from why did we think it was a good idea to give someone a piece of paper they're going to drop or put in their pocket anyway? Right?
Or not hang on to. Like, who has space to hang on to a card and a bid number and like all the program and all these things you're giving them? Like, just put it all in one. Like, you just have one program.
Yeah.
Everything on it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's a good point. Like, make sure the program kind of matches the environment, the atmosphere,
and your audience.
And the audience.
And the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
a good one.
I think that 45 minutes for a program is probably too long for any audience.
Agreed.
This day and age it is.
You don't even watch a 45-minute TV show. They're all like 25, 30 minutes.
Yes.
Right.
So you think we can sit and watch a screen and someone talking who shouldn't be talking for 45 minutes? Like, that's too. It's not that important. We don't have that much to say.
I've been accused of being a little long-winded too on stage, so I'm gonna
Just been kicked off.
I'm not kicked off.
At least you have a personality on stage, right? Like, so many of these programs are so boring.
Give them a mint julep.
Yeah. So,
Or
but
two.
the point is like, yes, we now drive our program by slides and we time it so that it is as concise as you can get. But look, it's a captive audience. I'm not here, and I don't think any of us are here to say, don't get up on stage and talk about your charity. Get up on stage and talk about your charity.
Yeah.
You have
That's
to do
why
it.
you're there.
Right.
But I'm telling you, like, if you go into ChatGPT and you write your speech, then tell it to shorten it, then tell it to shorten it again, and then tell it to do the TLDR, which is the too long didn't read, and then read that.
Agreed. I agree with that, because no one pays attention for that long anyways. I think the other big thing that we find a lot with organizations is they have too many activities at an event, like 7 fundraising options, like auction and wine pull and raffle and live auction and paddle race and fish bowls. And you could buy this art and like all this stuff. And
Throw
I'm
the
like,
football through the hole for a prize.
there's like there's way too many things. We typically say like 3 fundraising activities, and that way you can hit pretty much your entire audience with what they want to support you on. But like, don't add so many. It's confusing. It's confusing to the guest, and then you're upset at the end when they don't work well because you spread it too thin.
And understand the time frame, right? Like, for our event, because the doors open at 2:30. No one ever gets there at 2:30, but the board members. And then you go all to like 8 o'clock. We have time for you to kind of float around and do stuff, especially in the horse race is a fundraising activity for us. So that's an element of it. But you're right. Like, we go to these events and check-ins at 6 o'clock at night, and you're closing the auction, hopefully not at 8, but a lot of them still do, like 8 o'clock. And then your checkouts at 9. How are you doing all of those things?
Yeah.
To your point, it's like we went to one event and they had like 75 bottles in the wine pool, and you had like 20 minutes to sell wine bottles before everybody was ushered into the seated dinner.
Plus, you have like 75 bottles and 150 guests. So every couple's going to buy a bottle? Like, that's unrealistic. Like, we don't need that much.
I agree. Yeah, we did one recently, and I don't remember how many bottles of tequila or whatever they had, but it was ridiculous.
It was 100 bottles of wine and 116 bottles of bourbon.
Yeah.
Oh my
For
gosh.
200 people.
So I think just make it simple. Like,
Totally agree.
just it's easier to talk about what you're doing and ask people to do stuff when you don't have to list off 15 options of how they can support you too.
Right.
Yeah.
So just keep it simple and to the point.
Good stuff.
So to wrap everything up, what would you say if you had one piece of advice what is the number one thing you'd give your clients? Advice.
I think it would be hiring an event planner. You don't think? Come on, she runs an event planning
That's
company.
what I thought, but I want her opinion.
Yeah, I mean, that would be like my selfish advice of like hire us to help with your event. But I think the biggest thing is like keep it simple and keep it strategic of like, what are we doing? What's the purpose? And focus on that instead of having 1,000 different ideas and trying to put them all together.
Ladies and gentlemen, Adrienne Coffey, the voice of reason.
Yeah. But let me answer Elise's question and give you some kudos, okay? Because we hired you, obviously we think you're great, but we hired you as an event planner because of very specific reasons. And it was as this event has evolved over time, right? There have been a lot of things where it just took our organization a while, especially certain board members and committee members, like understanding that it's okay to spend a little bit of money in these areas and give up control in these areas that are inconsequential so that we can focus on other areas of the event. Because the challenge has always been for us that when you're running your own event, and look, we know how to run an event.
Yeah.
But what am I not doing? I'm not talking to
Engaging with
my
your
donors. I'm not acting as a board member. I'm acting as an event operator. And it came to a head at Country for a Cure just because there was just so many moving parts and so many issues. And look, we love this venue, but it is big. And so
Massive, yeah.
It's hard to be everywhere at once. And so I think that's where the board finally realized we're at a point now in our organization and in the evolution of this event where it's okay to spend a little bit of money to let somebody else operate, not just help plan, but show up and operate the event so that we can go do these other things.
And I think that when it comes to an event planner, I think some people often get stuck on, well, my event is already planned. I already know what I'm doing. I already, you know what I mean? So for our reasons, I mean, I think that you can drill down and say, where do I need the help? And there are different levels of support from an event planner. And for us, you guys came in and we said, this is our event. We know it. Here's where we need you. We really need logistically day of event operational things, right? The dealing with the vendors, the organizing volunteers, that stuff.
Yep.
Inconsequential,
And
but necessary.
Yes, because look, and Adrian, you've experienced this a lot, I'm sure. Volunteers are incredibly unreliable in certain circumstances, right? And so when they don't show up, right? So when we would have volunteers in the past and they didn't show up, who's it fall back on? It falls back on us, okay? So now, unfortunately, it's going to fall back on you.
But we're prepared for it.
Right? You're prepared for it. You're used to that, like, because we've been in your role. So, like, that's the other thing that people that are listening to this podcast, you need to consider. You're like, Elisa's right. Like, event planning is not just the planning part; it's the planning and executing.
Yeah.
And so both of those are important. And you need to think about, like, okay, you'll have your say as a client in how you want the event to be organized. You will, like, there's not an event planner except for Frank from the wedding planner or whatever it was, right? Who makes all the decisions, okay? Like, you're going to have your say in that, and you should leverage, the experience of your event planner in giving you advice on how to best do those things.
Right.
But what you're really going to benefit from is the day of the event when you're talking to your biggest donor or maybe the new 3 or 4 guests they brought, right, about your charity and what it's about, and not helping them figure out how to get someone checked into the mobile bidding software.
Or restocking a green room.
Or putting toilet paper in the bathroom, which I've done too.
Plumbing the toilets.
Yeah.
Or picking up all the coasters on the ground that people didn't take home with them.
It's right.
What are you saying, Adrian? Our idea was terrible?
Oh, no. We already have it in our plans. We're ready for it. I think that is the biggest point for us too, is like, we just take that time off of your hands so that you can then go talk to your donors. And even on the planning side too, like, you can now spend more time working with sponsors, getting their names for check-in.
You should see our guest list.
Instead of like replying to vendors or sending timelines or layouts or stuff like that. And that's the biggest thing.
These were the key pieces. These were our reasons behind bringing you in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other part of it is small organizations don't necessarily have an in-house development director or planner or something like that where they're now taking staff
volunteer based.
To plan this event, and your staff now is neglecting their other duties. And that's another point to like having someone do the logistics where you guys can just focus on bringing money in. And that's really what we do. So, I mean, there's different levels of like, we pick all your vendors, we come up with your theme, your messaging, your marketing, your strategy, everything. But there's other organizations who've been doing it for a while or know what they want, and they just want the support on the back end.
Yeah.
And so there's, different levels to that too. But like the goal is not that I'm bringing you money, it's that I'm freeing up your time so you can bring in more money.
Yep.
And I think a lot of people miss that designation of like, you're not hiring me to solicit sponsors for you.
Yeah.
Right.
You're hiring me to give you time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's insightful for sure. An important point to make.
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you to all of our listeners that stuck with us through this one. This has been a long one, but I think a good conversation in general.
I do too.
So definitely appreciate you being on with us. And for all of you out there that are thinking about hiring an event planner, Adrian, how can they get in touch with you?
You can go to our website, adrianco.com, and I'm sure we'll link it in the show notes too.
Yes, we will make sure we do that. Okay, so until next time, happy fundraising, guys.
A special thank you to Adrienne Coffey with A Touch of Bliss Events. We hope you enjoyed learning about event planners and how they can take your event to the next level. If you enjoyed our show, please take a moment to leave us a review. You can find us on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Don't forget to subscribe for more great content. And if you're a fan of video, check us out on YouTube. Until next time, happy fundraising.